This is a video where I want to go through the process of kind of building a thesis and a outline for an argumentative analysis essay. So in this case, I am making my essay doing an analysis of an advertisement, and this is the original advertisement. It's a Gucci ad. I love this ad because there's lots of stuff that you could potentially talk about in it. So I would start by going through and just listing all of the various observations that I might make about this ad. Not really thinking about what am I going to argue at the start, but just what kind of things do I see, what questions do I have. Once I've done that, then I'm going to form my first rough thesis statement. So here's my first rough thesis. This ad shows a man and woman in the desert. Now, of course, we want our thesis statements ideally to be focused, arguable, and revelatory. That's the FAR, focused, arguable, and revelatory. In this case, it's possibly maybe focused. Is it arguable? This ad shows a man and woman in the desert. No, it's definitely not arguable. That's exactly what the ad does. So I revise it. This is what I come up with. This ad shows a man towering over a woman who is on her knees before him, both in the desert. Okay, this is definitely more focused than the first one. But is it arguable? It adds more details in, but it still is telling me exactly what is in what we see in that original ad. So it is not arguable, even though it's definitely more focused, more detailed. So I revise again. This ad uses sex appeal to sell to the viewer. Okay, this gets away from just saying exactly what we are seeing in that ad, but nobody's going to say that ad does not use sex appeal to sell to the viewer. Nobody's going to argue against that, reasonably at least. So we're still not getting to something that's really a good, solid thesis. So let me revise again. Which of these two thesis statements would you say is better? This ad appeals to the viewer's pathos, or this ad tries but fails to appeal to the viewer's pathos. So just looking at those, I would hope you would think the second one is more interesting, because then I've got more to say, right? I've got to show how it tries to do this and argue how it fails to do that. So while each of those may be more arguable than any of our previous ones, the second one gives us even more to say. So, with that in mind, I'm going to revise again. I've got these various versions of it. This ad shows gender stereotypes, all right? That's more interesting than anything we've said so far, but still pretty basic. So I'll revise. This ad shows women as submissive and men as dominant. There we're getting more focused. We're getting more arguable. We still don't really know why it matters if it does that, though. Final version. While the ad may succeed in catching our attention, it destructively encourages the audience to believe stereotypes of submissive women and men, and domineering men. All right. This is good, right? It's focused, it's arguable, it's probably revelatory. It's going to show us something new that we wouldn't have seen just by looking at that ad. And it gives us lots to argue. And you can almost see this as it breaks down, that we're going to have to prove that the ad does succeed in catching our attention and how it does it. We're going to have to prove that it does encourage us to believe stereotypes of submissive women and stereotypes of domineering man, and we're going to have to argue why those things are destructive. So we almost have a little outline right there. Here's my final version. This harmful ad plays not merely to stereotypes of submissive women and dominating men, but also to a hierarchy of masculine civilization over feminine nature. So given myself tons of things to talk about. Now I'm going to start breaking that into my outline. So first I've got to show the reader the stereotypes. What makes the woman appear submissive? And this is where I would give my evidence. She's on her knees before the man. She's pulling her shirt down to cover herself. Her hand is on his shoe. And then, what makes the man dominant? He's towering above her. He's got this gladiator pose. There's no head on that body. And with all of that evidence, I would explain why the evidence makes her appear submissive, why this evidence makes him appear dominant, and ultimately why all of this is harmful. Then I would have to prove that masculine civilization is greater than feminine nature, according to the interpretation of this ad. I would say how the woman is equivalent to nature in the advertisement. Her shirt blends into the desert background, that she has a Native American appearance, which is associated with natural, with nature in our in cultural, American cultural attitudes, and that she has this intimate contact with the ground. Her skin touches the ground on three or five different points with her knees and her hand and her feet. The man, on the other hand, is equivalent with civilization in the ad. And I would argue that the metallic belt buckle of his shoes, that we associate that with technology. That he is separated from the ground. He's standing. His shoes are on the ground instead of his feet. There's no part of him that touches the ground. And then ultimately argue that as he dominates her, civilization dominates nature in our cultural attitudes, and that this is a harmful mythology, and just as those harmful stereotypes lead us towards harmful attitudes towards gender, that this harmful mythology leads us towards harmful attitudes of technology dominating nature. So there it is, the process of going through, revising your thesis statement, creating a more complex, more complicated thesis statement, and then giving yourself an outline that's going to structure the paper.